Welcome to another Telltale Books video. I'm Greg and I'm here to continue talking about William S. Burroughs. I've decided to include him as one of my deep dives because he is a very interesting modern American writer, considered to be one of the great writers in modern American literature. He's also embraced by the science fiction community as someone who has written about science fictional themes, even though he wasn't really a science fiction writer. He was actually one of the beat writers and a friend of both Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac. Matter of fact, Ginsberg was his literary agent and tried to get his stuff published. His third novel written was not published at the time it was written. He wrote it in 1953, but it wasn't published until 1985. And there's good reason. The title of the novel is Queer, a Novel. And yes, it is about homosexuality. It is about a homosexual couple. And it is an autobiographical, semi-autobiographical novel. So it is drawing upon Burroughs' own life, own experiences. He was a homosexual man, and he did experience situations very similar to what you find in this book. And it's based on his time when he was in Mexico, after the time he had accidentally killed his wife. I believe even when his wife was still alive, he was going out and finding young Mexican male prostitutes to hook up with. But in this book, you follow the character Lee, who figured in his previous book, Junky. And Junky and Queer were written back to back, which is why I'm going through this novel now, is because when he was writing Queer, he started writing he started editing his books in a manner where he would cut up his manuscripts and paste them back together again. And he did that very heavily in the next novel he wrote, The Naked Lunch, which is part of what gives that novel such a strong experimental feeling. With Queer, I don't feel you ever really notice the technique. It reads like a regular novel. It reads like a regular story. It being somewhat autobiographical, it doesn't have a moral. It doesn't really have much of a real conclusion, except to say the story follows the two characters, Lee and his lover. I forget the name, starts with an A. It follows them in their lives as they go out to bars, hook up with other men. Lee's lover is being kind of cold towards him, at least in the first half of the book. He's always trying to get away from Lee, but they do stick together and they travel around. They go to different cities, and early in the novel they learn about this. They're both junkies. Early in the novel they learn about this drug supposedly developed by the U.S. government, which allowed people to be telepathic. Little bit of a science fictional element in here, although maybe the CIA really did try to develop such a thing and not successfully do it. But as far as I know, there is no such drug. There never has been such a drug. And so that makes this novel kind of up there in science fiction territory. But they're going around looking for somebody to supply them with this drug. They want to get a hold of it. They want to be able to sell it. And they think it's going to be a great drug that's going to make them a lot of money. So they pursue a trail of clues they come upon as to who might have it. And they ultimately wind up in the home of this doctor off in the jungle, I believe in Panama, who supposedly has this stuff. And, well, he of course has no clue what these people are talking about. Or if he does, he's hiding it. But that's not said in the novel. And in the novel, it just seems like he's thinking these people are off their rocker. There is no such drug. And so they end up not finding the drug and giving up their quest, and the two of them kind of part company. So this story, a little more emotional content to it than Junky, but given the focus, given the subject, given that it is so centered on this relationship, on this sexual and emotional relationship, I feel that queer. I just think today's readers would want a whole lot more emotional connection to the story. The story is still kind of, in my mind, unemotional, unfeeling, still kind of dispassionate, still more like reporting than writing, than fiction writing. So if you're looking for a passionate love story, you're not going to find it here. And as a matter of fact, I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but a lot of homosexuals today, a lot of people in the LGBTQ plus community don't feel that this novel represents them very well. Possibly that's part of it. Possibly it's the language. In the 1950s, there were a lot of terms for homosexuals that were not nice, but everybody used them. Everybody, it's that thing. Everybody's saying it, so it's not bad. And that's how people were approaching that. That's how people were thinking. So there were a lot of words that Burroughs put into his novel because that's how homosexuals were referred to in the 1950s, and nobody thought twice about doing it. So he used them in here, and so I've seen criticism of this book on that aspect. As far as content warnings, obviously, if you're uncomfortable with the idea of same-sex relations, this book isn't for you. If you're uncomfortable about the dispassionate, what I call dispassionate manner in which Burroughs handles this subject, then this book isn't for you. If you're looking for a passionate love story, this book isn't for you. If you're looking for a strong statement against the cruelties towards the homosexual community back then, it's not in this book. This book is just about Burroughs' life with this guy, and they're going off on this quest. Even though such things happened a lot back then, there's never an instance in here where anybody's getting the crap kicked out of them because they're queer. I'm trying to remember if there's even reference to that. I think there is reference to the fact that there was a lot of violence towards people of their persuasion back then, but I can't recall any specific instances. I also can't recall a lot of explicit sex, except for one scene, and, well, today's romanticities get far more explicit than what Burroughs gets in this one dream scene. It's a dream. It is a dream. It's not reality. Even within the story, the main character Lee is asleep and dreaming, and dreams about this encounter with a man. And it does get a little bit explicit, but like I say, not anywhere near as explicit as what you could find in today's typical romantasy books. So from today's perspective, I think queer is rather tame in as far as sexuality goes. So that, I think that's all the content warnings I can give you. I wouldn't characterize what I experienced here as a great American modernist novel. It's considered to be one of the better novels of modernist American literature. It was enjoyable. I mean, assuming that the subject matter doesn't disturb you, it was enjoyable. It was an enjoyable story. It just didn't blow me away at all. And it didn't come across to me as something important. I didn't feel like, wow, I just read something that is so important and relevant. It didn't feel that way. So that's queer. And I'm moving on then to a buddy read with Emily of The Naked Lunch, which is kind of what's started me off on this Burroughs track, as she came and said she wanted to read The Naked Lunch. and I hadn't read Burroughs, and I thought, yeah, I want to read The Naked Lunch. So I got his copies, and then I thought, well, I want to read all the rest of Burroughs too, and I want to do a deep dive because I want to know how he got to The Naked Lunch. And so this is last thing he published before he did The Naked Lunch. I mean, the last thing well, it's hard to say. He might have written other things before The Naked Lunch, but I don't know that. And like I found out, this wasn't published until 1985. Got a really cool cover, by the way. As a graphic designer, I love it. This wasn't published until 1985 by Penguin, but it was written in 1953. And Ginsberg did take it around and try to sell it to publishers. But of course, 1953, this kind of subject matter, nobody wanted to touch it. They didn't want to publish Lady Chatterley's Lover because that book had gotten a bad rep and was considered illegal for its erotic content. And that was not same-sex eroticism. That was between a man and a woman. So, that one would have been a little more, Lady Chatterley's Lover, I think, would have been a little more acceptable to the 1950s society than Queer. And Lady Chatterley's Lover was not acceptable. It was considered to be in violation of good taste, and so it was not allowed to be published and distributed in the United States, and I think England too. So these kinds of novels had a hard time back then. You couldn't talk about sex and get it published. That would soon change. By the late 1950s, Robert Silverberg and Harlan Ellison were publishing all kinds of sex books. But in 1953 still, it was forbidden. Have you read Queer? If you have, leave your comments. I want to hear it. I don't know everything about Burroughs or Queer or any of this. I'm no expert. I'm not a professor. I just know what I read in the introductions and a little bit on the internet and the reading the actual book. And I'm giving you those impressions. And if you have more information to give us, please put it in our comments for everybody to see and enjoy and learn more about Burroughs and Queer. And otherwise, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and come on back and see me and Emily try to talk about Naked Lunch. She's already started reading it. She says she's about a quarter of the way through, and she said she doesn't know what the fuck she's reading. So she's taking it slow. I haven't started it yet. I'm about to embark on that, and so I'll see what she's talking about. And come on back and watch that video. It may be a train wreck. It might be really funny. So I hope you'll join us for that, and actually many other William Burroughs and many other authors that we are going to be covering here on Cocktail Book.